Alrighty, hello everybody. In this video, I'm going to be showing you how to create two wheels that are moving on an axle at the same speed. So I'm going to go ahead and do here is I'm going to click play on this and you'll see this is the final product. This is what we're going to end up constructing in OnShape. I'm going to show you how to create the rims, the wheels, and then also the axles, how to bring it in here and then use the fasten, revolute, as well as the gear relation tool in OnShape assemblies. So let's go ahead and let's begin. This is the part studio of the parts that I actually created here. So we only have to create one rim, one tire, and then we can end up just importing this multiple times. And then I also created this axle here, which is really just a very simple cylinder. That's what we end up creating. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create a new part studio. You can use part studio 1 for yourself because you probably have nothing in there. I'm just going to create part studio 2 here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a sketch. Now the sketch is going to be on the top plane. Now if I go back here to showing you what I had created, you'll see that I have this sketch first, and then I end up using the revolve tool as well as make connector. That's going to make our life a whole lot easier once we get into the assembly. And then I also end up performing an extrusion for the axle as well as for the rim cutout. So moving on here, let's go ahead and let's begin. What I'm going to first start off by doing is creating a construction line, and I'm going to go ahead and bring that out the radius that I want of my wheel. So I'm going to make the radius actually be 7.5 inches. So that means the total diameter of our wheel is going to be about 15 inches. And what we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and bring a line out, and this is going to be the thickness, or not the thickness, but the width of the actual tread. So we're going to make that maybe, actually let's go 2.5. Let's go with that. And so now what we're going to do is we're also going to create another line. And so I can end up bringing this down a certain distance. Let's maybe go 2 inches there. And then I'm going to bring it out a certain thickness of our tire. So let's go ahead and make this just be 2/10 of an inch is what we're going to do, 2/10. And so now we are creating the actual inner thickness part of this tire. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and use the sketch fillet tool. So I'm going to click on these two parts. I'm going to set my radius to be 1 inch. Now if I press enter, it's going to ask me to enter that again. This is where you can type in 1 inch. And then now what we're going to do is we're going to actually use the offset tool. So I'm going to go ahead and click on these two parts. And just as we said before, the thickness was 0.2 inches. Now if I end up pressing enter and I go 0.2, after dragging that arrow in here, you'll see that this also has a thickness of 0.2 inches. Then what we need to do is very simple. We just need to connect this. And then if I press escape there, I can go ahead and once again select the line tool and then click right here too. Okay, now as you can see, this is shaded in, which means that we have closed geometry there. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually end up mirroring this. So I can end up mirroring all of these entities here. Oops, sorry, let's redo that. We want to select here, select the mirror line, and then we want to select all the entities that are to be mirrored. So if I end up doing this, that'll select those, and then I could just select these two that are left here. So now you'll see we have a closed sketch here. We also have a closed sketch here. So now what we need to do is we need to create the actual rim part. Once again, we're going to be using the mirror tool. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create this first part. I'm going to have this be the outer rim here. I'm going to make that be maybe 0.3 inches. So it's going to go 0.3 inches. And then basically what we're going to do is we're going to start cutting in here. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and click right here. I'm going to click this, and then I'm going to bring it in a certain distance. So, oops, let's go ahead and let's go back. Let's redo this. I'm going to click the spline tool again, which was just right up here. We're going to click right here. I'm going to click right here, and I'm going to bring this in maybe to about right here. That's what I'm thinking. So I'm going to press escape. Now, as we can see, this is not closed geometry yet. So what we've got to do is we've got to close this shape. So I'm going to click right here. And then what I need to finally do as well is, once again, bring the center line down here. Now, what I could also do is just whenever I mirror that, that's actually going to close it. Might be a little bit better if we did it that way. Another thing that we want to do is we want to actually close this off too. Because this is actually going to be filled with air in there, so that's going to be voided. We actually don't want to revolve this part. And so now we can go ahead and click on that mirror tool once again, and I'm going to select the mirror line, which is going to be right here. I can select the entities that I want to mirror. So I'm going to select all of these, and then also this guy, and then now you can see once again we have the closed geometry. Okay, so now what I can end up doing is I can start off by first creating the rim. I'm going to select these two sections. I can use the revolve tool. And then once I go out here, it's going to ask me for the revolve axis. We can click right there. And then so now as you can see, we've created this rim. So I'm going to create this as a new part. I'm going to rename this. We're going to put down rim on this, rim. And then we're also going to change the color of this. So we're going to make this like a silver or gray. That's what we're going to end up doing. Now, as you can see, this doesn't have the typical rim cut out. We're going to be doing that shortly. But first, I want to show you how we can also create this tire part in here. So now we can end up going in here. And then we can end up selecting this as well as this guy. And then now we can end up revolving this. And so the revolve axis is going to be right in here. And then so now it's going to create that. Now, one thing we want to do is we want to make sure that we do not add. We want to make this a new part. If you did add to the previous part, basically you just want to end up changing the color of all those faces. But just to make this a little bit easier, I'm going to make it a new part, and I'm going to make it black here. We could also make it a little bit darker so it's not entirely blacked out, so we can still see some of those features on this. So now we've got our tire created. So what I want to do is I want to create that inner cutout part of the rim. So if I go to the front, I can create a new sketch. And so now what we're going to end up doing is we're going to use the circular pattern tool. So I'm going to go ahead and bring this out about, let's go 8 inches. So I'm going to create a circle that's 8 inches in diameter, and then the inner part of this I'm going to make about 2.5 inches for the diameter. So then now what I can do is I can go ahead and create a line here. So I'm going to create this line. It's going to be right here, and then it's going to go right here on the edge of that circle. And then what we can end up doing is I can create another line that's going to be coincident to that circle as well as coincident to this circle. And then I'm going to once again create another line that's going to be coincident to this circle, also coincident to this circle. And now this is where we are going to end up using some geometric constraints. And so if I go ahead and click the drop down here, oops, all the way over here, we can look for different geometric constraints. First thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to ensure that these two lines are parallel to each other. Okay. The other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to actually dimension this out, and I'm going to dimension this so that these are actually about 0.3 inches. Let's go, actually, we're going to go 0.35. Yeah, like 0.35, a whole lot more. And then the last and final thing that we're going to do is we're also going to dimension from this line to this line, and we are going to ensure that that is 30 degrees. Now, because I know that that is 30 degrees, basically, if I end up creating 12 of these instances, that's going to get us to be at 100, or sorry, that's going to get us to get 12 of these repeated. It's going to give us 360 degrees. And my apologies, we're going to actually dimension from here to here. That's going to be the 30 degrees. So we can press enter. And then so now what we want to do is we want to go ahead and use the circular pattern tool. So we can click right there. Also remember, you can always search tools. You can just type in circular pattern if you're having a hard time finding it. You can find it there. So now we're going to end up creating these 3 items. And then what we want is we want to end up creating 12 of these instances. Now it ends up coming all the way back around. Now if I press the green check mark, we're going to notice, if I take out the rim, that we've created these inner parts here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to hover over these little slices, and we're going to actually use the extrude tool to remove these sections of our rim so that it gives it that style and design. And so now if I end up going to extrude, we can go to remove here. And then what I want to do is I want to merge. The merge scope should be the rim here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make this symmetric as well. If I go back into my little isometric view, I can end up dragging this out further. And so now you'll find that we ended up creating that little design on the inside of the rim. So now, last thing that I want to do before I actually end up calling this good to go for our tire and rim is I want to end up creating a mate connector. So I'm going to search mate connector. We can find that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to actually go to this inner part here. We're going to go to the far side of this where it's going to be right here on this edge. We're going to click, oops, let's redo that once again. Let's exit out of that. Let's go back to make connector here, and let's try that one more time. So there we go. We're on the edge of that. I'm going to click green check mark. So now we've created that make connector. What I'm also going to do is on this other side, I'm going to create a make connector too. So we can click right there, and this is going to basically make our life a whole lot easier once we get into that assembly. Now, last thing that we want to do is we also want to create our little axle, right? So what we can do is we can create a sketch. We're going to create this sketch on the front plane here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just create it out here. We're going to say that this axle is going to be, let's say, 3 inches. Actually, no, let's bring that down a little bit. So maybe go 2.5 to make this look a little bit more to scale. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to extrude this, and I'm going to go ahead and make sure that it's symmetric. We're going to extrude it out. Let's go 20 inches. Why not? Actually, I think we should do more, 36 inches. Yeah, let's do that. Okay, green check mark. I'm going to rename this as our axle. And I know you all might be thinking this is kind of a sad axle because it is just a cylinder. So yes, it is very, very simple, but it helps to kind of get the idea across of this and what we're setting up. So we've got our axle, we've got our tire, we've got our rim. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to end up creating an assembly. Now for you all, it's going to be assembly 1, right? But I'm just going to create an assembly just to kind of mimic what it's going to look like. So I have this blank document. Now what I'm going to do is in Part Studio 2, I can end up bringing these parts in, right? So as you'll notice, I only have 1 tire, 1 rim. What we're going to do is we're going to actually fasten these 2 together, and then we're going to end up duplicating these. So I'm going to show you all how you can copy and paste this, and it's going to retain that fasten mate that we applied to this actually even too. So it's going to make your life a little bit easier. Now, whenever I click on this, I can see that there's a yellow mate connector that shows up here. So I'm going to hover over this. I'm going to click right there. That's going to be the correct mate connector point that we want, and then we're also going to click right here too. Now, if I fasten these 2 together, we can see that these are going to move together. So very, very good. That's what we want. We're going to also move this axle right here to the middle, to the origin point. and we'll get it close to the origin. I don't really need it to be absolutely spot on. But then what I'm going to do is I want to fix this because the axle will not be moving in relation to the tire and rim. Those two are just going to be rotating. Now what we can end up doing here is we're going to take this tire and rim, highlight them, and then what I can do is I can do Control C, which will copy it, and then if I go over here, I can do Control V, which is going to paste that. Now you will notice that we do have 2 tires, 2 rims. And so now what we can do is we can establish these revolute mates. So I'm going to click right here on this mate, and then I'm going to click on this mate connector point over here. Very, very good. It's going to seem like the tire isn't going to move with the rim, but it does end up doing that in the end. Additionally, I'm going to click right here, and then I also want to establish these 2 mate points being together. So now as you can see, we've got it set up where the tire and the rims are in here. However, if I move this tire is not going to move. So what we can end up doing is use the gear relation, and I'm just going to select these 2 revolutes. And then if I press the green check mark, it's going to end up setting this up. Now we don't have this where it has a differential for this, which means that basically whenever one tire moves, it's going to have the same movement or same rotation speed than the other tire with this. So if you end up seeing here, I can end up setting this up, and once I rotate this, the other one's going to rotate at the same speed. Now whenever cars are actually turning, we do have a differential is what it's called, which allows one tire to move slower than the other. For instance, let's say that we are oriented this way, we're going to take a left turn, meaning we're going to turn this way. Basically, this tire would be moving slower in terms of rotation speed than this tire, because this tire is going to end up having to cover a greater distance on the outside of the left turn than this one would. So if you also want to maybe mess around with that, you can mess around with these ratios here, and then you can test it out and see what that ends up looking like. But for this purpose, we're just going to keep this as 1 here. But basically, now we've got it where our tires are moving together on an axle. And if you want to make it look pretty cool where you don't even have to click and drag anything, if you end up clicking animate, you can go to a loop, and then you press the green check mark, and then you can see it in action. If you want to make your car go a little bit faster, change the steps down to a lower number. Anyways, this video showed you how to create this assembly, the tire, on an axle. We use the revolute mates as well as the gear relation. We also use the fasten mates for our assembly. Hope it was helpful. Please like, comment, and subscribe. See y'all later.